What's going on, guys? Mega Gig back with another video going over the Witch Doctor Helltooth Firebats set today. And I don't know if it's set in stone or not yet, which one is better. I think I prefer the Irakiers. Just the play style is a little bit different, but I wasn't too satisfied with my Helltooth Firebats video that I put up not too long ago. So there's been a few changes since the PTR anyways, and we're going to go ahead and go over the build again with the updates and whatnot. So the first thing you definitely want to have is a Sacred Harvester. Soul Harvest now stacks up to 10 times, and this couples great with our Lakuma's Ornament, where it reduces all damage taken by 6% for each stack of Soul Harvest we have. That's 60%, and then we're also using the Languish Rune, which increases our armor by 10% per harvested enemy, stacking up to 10 times for another 60% armor. So a lot of toughness, a lot of damage coming from that as well, because we also gain intelligence. And then in our offhand, we're using a Vile Hive because Locust Swarm gains the effect of the Pestilence Rune and deals increased damage as well. 60% is the most on that. So that little bit of damage boost is nice, but we really just want it for the Pestilence Rune. And if you weren't sure, the Pestilence Rune gives Locust Swarm a 100% chance to jump to 2 additional enemies instead of 1, basically making it spread twice as fast. Very, very fast. There might be something else you could work in here too, but I just prefer the Pestilence Rune or the Vile Hive myself, because then it allows me to run Cloud of Insects, which reduces our damage taken for every enemy affected. I'm already going over the skills here. For the armor, you're going to want the entire 6 pieces of the Helltooth Harness set. The 2-piece set bonus, enemies hit by our primary skills are affected by necrosis, becoming slowed and taking 1500% weapon damage every second for 10 seconds. And the ones we are using are Wall of Death and Firebats. And then the 4-piece set bonus, after applying necrosis to an enemy, you take 60% reduced damage for 10 seconds. So it's very important to keep casting your Firebats and Wall of Death to keep that toughness bonus up. But also for the 6-piece set bonus, after casting Wall of Death, you gain 4,400% increased damage for 15 seconds to your primary skills, which are, of course, Wall of Death is in that list, and Firebats. And those are our 2 here that we are using. And yeah. So you definitely want to be casting that. When you cast Wall of Death, you can see this for 15 seconds, and yeah. So keep in mind about the 4-piece set bonus too. You need to either cast that or Firebats to keep that bonus up. Now, one thing to mention is when you cast this, it shows a little notification here. However, when you cast anything else, it doesn't actually show the 4-piece set bonus on there, I believe. I don't remember it showing it on there while you're in battle. So just be wary of that. As for our belt, we are using Jungle Wraps. Firebats deal up to 300% increased damage to enemies affected by either Locust Swarm or Piranhas. Unfortunately, we aren't working Piranhas into this build. It doesn't really fit anywhere, but we are using Locust Swarm, so a big damage boost there. Our first ring, we are using a Unity along with our Enchantress. She has a Unity on there as well, and she has her amulet where she cannot die. And then we've also got a Oculus ring on her for the damage boost, and a S of Johan for helping us bunch up enemies from time to time. And I've just got a Windseeker on her. She doesn't have the ring where it gives her the ability to stun, but that's still a weapon that I've got on there. And then for our other ring, we're using a Compass Rose coupled with our amulet, the Traveler's Pledge for the Endless Walk set. This is going to give us bonus damage while standing still and bonus damage reduction while moving. As for legendary gems, we are using Bane of the Stricken and Bane of the Trapped, 2 of the greatest gems in the game. Now this one has changed, and it's not a hard and fast thing where you use one or the other. Currently I'm using Pain Enhancer. You can still use a Tagic. Tagic does give increased damage and armor for every stack up to 10 stacks, which is a big boost. and it gives the same regardless if you're on a single target or in a big bunch. However, Pain Enhancer gives us a couple of slight benefits over that, at least in big groups. It gives us instant damage in big groups for the attack speed. It also gives us more sustain because we're attacking faster. And it also, in big groups, allows us to cast Haunt much faster because the cast of Haunt is affected by attack speed. And it allows us to cast this much faster and get more enemies affected by Haunt. So yeah, it's really up to you which one you run. Currently, I'm running Pain Enhancer. That doesn't mean I won't use Tegek again in the future. I've kind of gone back and forth, but either of those two gems will fit nicely in there. Moving on to our cube, we are using the Staff of Shuropetra. Firebats attacks 100% faster, costs 75% less mana, and has its damage increased by 150%. So a great damage item there. And then, of course, costing less mana is great too. So we can sit here and channel Firebats nearly forever. I mean, it goes down over time, but yeah, this is going to be our main mana spender, I guess you could say. And then for the armor slot, we're using Coils of the First Spider. While channeling Firebats, you gain 30% damage reduction and 80% life per hit. So that is pretty significant. So when we're gaining the 50% damage reduction from this, we really only lose 20% instead of all 50 by the time it counts down, because we're gaining the 30%. We're getting 30% back from this. So sustain and damage reduction, pretty much a must-have. And then we're using the Ring of Emptiness. You deal 300% increased damage to enemies affected by your Haunt and Locust Swarm. They got to be affected by both of them to gain that damage. But that's not hard. Just cast Locust Swarm once, and then, like I said, that can crit, and also Wall of Death can crit. Just giving you attack speed from this. So once you cast these two, and then you just cast this 2 or 3 times, and then you start channeling, and everything dies. That does it for the cube. Let's go with the skills real fast. We're using Haunt, Draining Spirits. This can be a kind of a mana heavy build, especially when you get to a single target like the Rift Guardian or whatever. So we're using Draining Spirit for the mana return, or mana per second, I guess. And yeah, you might be wondering why you have to cast Locust Swarm or Haunt if by chance we're using Creeping Death. That's because we want to stay affected. We want enemies to stay affected by the rune, which enemies affected by Locust Swarm deal 25% reduced damage. And then same with this, you want to keep that mana per second. So you are going to have to cast these periodically, every 12 seconds and every 8 seconds to keep that going, which is going to start to drain on your mana. So yeah, long story short, too late for that. We're using Draining Spirit. Also using Spirit Walk Jaunt for staying in Spirit Walk for 3 seconds. You can use Honored Guest if you like. If you want to return some mana, this comes in handy on the Rift Guardian and whatnot. And you can also use Severance if you like, increase your movement speed. But again, with these two, it's only going to last 2 seconds. But of course, there's added benefits with this. It's kind of offset by the 3 seconds. Like, you move faster, but you're in it less. So that's really up to you, personal preference. And then we're using Wall of Death, communing with spirits. This makes enemies deal less damage and slows them as well. And of course, it also triggers our 6-piece set bonus to allow us to do that massive damage. For our main damage dealer, we're using Firebats, Cloud of Bats. This allows the Firebats to spin around us, kind of like a whirlwind. And then we're using Locust Swarm, Cloud of Insects, as we've mentioned a couple times, because we want enemies to be doing less damage to us. And this is also going to allow us to benefit from our Ring of Emptiness and our Jungle Wraps. And then finally, we're using Soul Harvest, Languish. Again, we're using Languish for the increased armor, 10% per harvested enemy. So 60% bonus armor because we are having 10 stacks. Then for passive skills, we're using Graven Justice. This is why we don't really need cooldown reduction. We're using Spirit Vessel to basically cheat death. Confidence, ritual, all enemies are going to be within 20 yards, so we're going to be dealing 25% increased damage, and then of course creeping death. As for gems, really quick, I want to mention I am using intelligence gems and a vitality gem here. You can swap out to diamonds in the armor if you like, but I would leave the vitality gem in the helm because you don't really need cooldown reduction very much. As for Paragon points, movement speed and mana, and then put everything into intelligence. Unless, of course, you need vitality, then you can dump a couple of points into vitality. If you're earlier on in the game, you're lower level, I would do maximum mana before movement speed, and then movement speed and intelligence there. As for these, most of these are pretty standard. Critical hit chance, then damage. With this one, again, you don't need cooldown reduction as much, so attack speed, then cooldown reduction. Resist all, armor, life, and life regen. Then a utility, life per hit. And then you can take either one of these second. Really, if you're finding yourself really struggling on mana, you'll take resource cost reduction. If not so much, then take area damage second, and then gold fine last. So yeah, that is the Helltooth Firebats build. I've had some video playing in the background. It's a Greater Rift 95. I did have to fish just a little bit to get it, but mainly because the rifts they were giving me were just absolute garbage. And so yeah, that one wasn't too bad. You'll notice the Rift Guardian does take a little while. He's a Rift Guardian that that has a lot of crowd control, and well, he hits you, he knocks you back, and this build suffers very greatly against crowd control because your damage is all coming from Firebats, and every time you get knocked away, you can't just start channeling again. You have to run back in and get everything going again, and so yeah, this build can very much suffer if you're up against a lot of crowd control type type enemies. And then the Rift Guardian, of course, like I was saying, he doesn't spawn any extra helpers either, so it's just you versus him. So there's no area damage. There's nothing else to cast Haunt on to get more mana back. So he's really one of the worst Rift Guardians for this build. This build does unbelievable damage, but it is a little slower because it takes time to get everything going. You have to cast Wall of Death, and then you have to get Haunt on a couple of enemies, and then you can channel. And but if you're against, like I said, if you're against an elite pack or whatever that's going to have a lot of crowd control, then you're going to have a bit of a struggle. But yeah, let me know what you guys think of the build. This is basically the newest version of the build. It plays basically the same as it did before. The skills haven't really changed. Just a little bit of the gear has changed around a little bit, and then the buffs. So yeah, it plays a lot the same. If you guys like Firebats builds, I think you're going to like this one. I'll get a Rack Ears up, though, for comparison very soon, and let you guys decide which of the two you like. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and a comment, and subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you guys for watching. I do appreciate it. More good stuff to come. Take care.